Welcome to Mooney Reads. Today I'm going to be talking a little bit about my personal curriculum that I have set up for this year. I love that the whole personal curriculum thing is kind of trending in certain parts of the internet because not only is it just a good thing to do, generally speaking, but I love hearing how other people have been doing it because it gives me different ideas. A couple of years ago, I tried to put together a class for myself, like a independent study sort of thing. I wrote out a calendar for it. I had papers planned, like a lot of reading. I had 3 different topics. And I went really in detail in the video. I do think there's a lot of good information in there because I talk about how I found all the information for my classes, especially the ones that I maybe didn't know as much about. But it didn't really stick, and the stuff that I found was good, and I think the idea of it was good, but it was just not right for me personally. I have a master's degree. I've taken a lot of classes. I have taught classes, but I've also gone through like severe academic burnout, so I don't know why treating it like a literal class, why I thought that was a good idea. So I've changed it up. I've been inspired seeing other people talk about it. I honestly don't remember what I heard from who, but I might put videos in the description of people that I've enjoyed that have talked about theirs that might have inspired some of this. But rather than having a strict schedule, I have broken down what I would like to read into quarters, so 3-month chunks, and I have really limited what I want to read within each. And a big thing about how I want to do it is that I am trying different approaches and trying to be really intentional with basically being okay that there is going to be wiggle room. Like, I am anticipating that I'm not going to follow any of this, because the alternative is I do one thing wrong and it's suddenly all out the window. And I don't want that to happen. I actually do want to read all of the books that I have laid out and watch all of the movies that I have laid out. So I have 3 different topics that I have laid out, and I'm going to talk about how I'm approaching them differently and why I'm approaching each differently, other than, like, I want to try different ways, but there's a reason behind kind of why I chose all of this. So I have a little book that's going to have notes about my personal curriculum. I wrote down what all I wanted to read and watch, and plan on doing like little updates, maybe not after every single book because I already do have a media journal that I'm going to be putting this in, but any thoughts that I have about the topics or where I see kind of overlap, or just at the very least quarterly or so updates on how I feel a lot of this is going. So the 3 different topics that I have includes one topic that I have already learned a lot about and want to learn more about, a topic that I have been a casual consumer of but haven't really read a whole lot about, and then something that is more skills based. Within each of these I have books that I want to read and films that I want to watch, and then I also have outside resources. So I have conference panels that I want to watch. I have some museum websites that I want to look through, articles, that sort of thing. So I'll go through each of my personal curriculums, talk about why I chose what I chose and what I'm going to be doing for each, and then the later part of the video is when I'll actually go over what I'm reading and watching and stuff like that, specifically for those who are like interested in the topic and stuff like that. So I'm going to start with the topic that I already know a lot about and am basically just wanting to dive into more, and that is HIV and AIDS. I have my HIV/AIDS TBR. I've talked about it a lot. I was really excited when I finished Let the Record Show, because that's been a big one that I really wanted to finish getting through. The main thing is just that the big books are intimidating. But since I finished that, I thought that I would really go into it, and the way that I'm approaching this, I'm not just like throwing my whole TBR into it. I've broken it down into subtopics. So I have a section that I'm going to be reading on HIV and art, and for that I have kind of two like classes that I want to do throughout the year. The first one is more general on HIV and art, and then the second one goes and looks more at specific people or specific examples of art. And then in the later half of the year, I want to focus on HIV and AIDS in Black America. And with the first quarter that I'll be doing that, I'm going to be looking at kind of more history, so looking at AIDS in the greater Black community, and specifically the Black queer community. And then in the second part of it, I'm going to be focused a lot more on the Black queer community and looking more specifically at Black queer writing and art that's kind of around that or within the era of mostly like the 80s and 90s. For this particular personal curriculum, I have a little bit more output that I want to have than some of the other ones, in terms of writing at any rate. I'm going to be doing my media journal for everything that I read, watch, etc. But I also want to make an annotated bibliography, which is basically like a really nice description of each thing, or summary rather. And then I would also like to have a paper for each quarter, even if it takes me 4 months to do a quarter. Just I want to take whatever I've read and watched and make some sort of paper about it, or relating to the topic. So that's how I'm approaching the topic that I already know about, I already had frame of reference for, and want to delve further. Next, I'll talk about the topic that I didn't really know that much about, that I wanted to learn more about. And that is going to be prehistory and dinosaurs. And for this one, I have it as a 1 quarter, like one, but I think it's going to end up being longer than that, just because I do actually have more books for this one. I am doing less writing, but I think the reason that I didn't break this out into multiple semesters is because I would get way too bogged down with what to read when, so I just kind of just put it all together. And I picked the books for this one literally based on what I own. I was looking, one of the things I've really wanted to do more in previous years that I just haven't, is to read more books outside of my kind of main scope. So I've gotten quite a few nature books. I've been really interested in prehistory and dinosaurs with some of the YouTube that I watch. So that's kind of the niche that I went with. The books that I have are mostly dinosaurs, with like a little bit of non-dinosaur old stuff thrown in. And then with the films, I went through several lists online, and I tried to find something that was earlier and something that was a lot more recently made, so that I can kind of have that dynamic of kind of being able to see the sort of progress. And then I've got one in between that's also like well known. So this is one of those things where it's a topic that I don't know a ton about, but I'm also approaching it as like just a fun thing to know more information about, and not something super academic, which is how I was approaching the personal curriculum stuff in previous years, which is really good, and I do want to revisit all of those topics. But I think for the moment, the low stakes, fun topic is just something good to have. Now, the third and final personal curriculum that I have put together is based around a skill. And I decided to focus on cooking because it's something that I'm not super comfortable with. I very intermittently have the executive function to really cook. And I feel like getting these smaller skills is just going to make it feel like less of a big task and easier to do. And the way that I chose stuff for this was, again, based on books that I already had. However, I think even if I didn't already have this cookbook, I would probably still get it for this. Start Here by Sola Ewele is set up to be a course. So I'm literally going to read each chapter, try to do a couple of recipes from each one of them. And then while I'm doing that, I also have some books about food or cooking, some memoirs, and some fiction to kind of make it extra fun and exciting. So I think that's a good way to approach kind of a new skill. Just get one really good resource that can teach you and then add extra things to make it feel more fun. So those are the three main personal curriculums that I have. So hopefully that'll be a good variety for my brain in terms of like what I'm looking at, but also in terms of like seriousness. I think I have one topic that I'm doing more intensively, one that's just vibes, and the other is like a new skill. So that's all in terms of kind of how I picked what I picked and the different methods that I'm trying. The rest of this video is going to be more or less a TBR video. I'm going to go into the specific topics and talk about what I'm actually planning to read. So if you're interested in the topics, here you go. So starting out with my HIV and AIDS list, I have, I think, a fairly extensive TBR in general, but I chose to break it down and really hone in on certain subtopics. So I have my personal curriculum for it, like I said, broken up into 4 parts. For the first part of it, I'm focusing on AIDS and art in kind of a maybe like broader sense. So I have a couple of books that are on queer art more generally. I'm going to be reading through A Queer Little History of Art. I've already read the intro of it, and I plan to look at a different piece and the descriptions more slowly. It's not one that I'm gonna, I think, sit and read from cover to cover. And then I have Time is the Thing the Body Moves Through, which talks about the body in queer art, which for obvious reasons I think is going to be really related to HIV and AIDS in art. And then I also have a book that's about art and protest. It talks about HIV and AIDS in part, but it's also about more than that. And that is The War of Art by Lauren O'Neill Butler. From there, I also have After Silence, A History of AIDS Through Its Images. And this one is written by one of the members of Grand Fury, that was one of the art collectives in or adjacent to ACT UP. And so he's going to be talking about art from that, as well as other AIDS protest art. And I'm super excited that I finished the record show to kind of have this inform it, because that book referenced a lot of different art pieces and stuff like that. And this is another one that I've started. I've gotten through the introduction so far, but like I said, I'm stoked for it. And then the final book that I have for this quarter is Reframing Bodies, AIDS Bearing Witness in the Queer Moving Image. So this one is more focused on film. I think this is going to be really good to read after some of these other ones, especially because going into the second part, I've got a lot more films. I only have 2 for this first section, and that is Common Threads, which is a documentary on the AIDS quilt, I'm pretty positive I've seen this particular one, but it's been a while. And then the other one that I have is Silence Equals Death, which is a documentary about gay art in New York around this time. Along with all of this, I'm also going to be watching through a conference that I found on YouTube that looks like it's going to be really good. It's like 4 hours long, so it's definitely something that I'm going to be watching in bits and pieces. But it's on visual arts and AIDS. And then my other thing to do for this personal curriculum is to look through different A Day Without Art exhibits, which I think I originally had found one, but it seems like a lot of museums have done this throughout the years, so I don't know which ones I'll end up looking at, but I think it's going to be really neat. And this is actually something that I have to do more than once kind of as we go down. So that brings us to AIDS and Art Part 2, and in this one I'm focusing more on specific people and specific works of art now that we have kind of a history and a frame with which to look at some of this. So I'm going to read Radiant by Brad Gooch, which is about Keith Haring. And then I have Hold Tightly Gently by Martin Duberman, which is about Essex Hemphill and Michael Callan. And then I have Dr. Sad by David Bateman, which is autofiction about a professor who finds out that he has AIDS and goes on a road trip, I believe. And this is one that I've had for a while. It was actually sent to me a while back, so I've talked about it a couple of times and just haven't gotten around to really reading it, but it looks super interesting. And then along with these, I have several films that I want to watch, including Elegy in the Streets, which I have watched previously. It's a silent film. It's available for free. I'll put the link below. I actually watched this as I was reading Gentrification of the Mind by Sarah Schulman, which talks about the impact of HIV and AIDS culturally. So looking at how things were gentrified as people were dying and how the culture of art became really disconnected. But anyways, I plan to rewatch that. And then I have Buddies, which is one of the, if not the earliest film with someone with a main character who has HIV or AIDS. Blue from 1993, which is more experimental. I don't remember much else beyond that. But then I also have Tongues Untied, which I have also seen before, but I want to rewatch. And then alongside that, I have a music album that I want to listen to, Purple Heart by Michael Callan. So I'll have a work that includes Essex Hemphill with Tongues Untied, and then Michael Callan with Purple Heart to go along with Hold Tightly Gently. And then I want to explore additional A Day Without Art exhibits. And then the third quarter that I have planned, I want to look at HIV and AIDS in Black America. So the first quarter I have 3 books. The Secret Epidemic by Jacob Levinson, which is about HIV and AIDS in the Black community. The Boundaries of Blackness by Kathy Cohen, which is looking at it in terms of politics and how HIV and AIDS is being treated within the Black community. And then and then this one I actually have on me instead of on my shelf somewhere. Evidence of Being, The Black Gay Cultural Renaissance and the Politics of Violence by Darius Boost. And I think the subtitle kind of tells you what it's focused on. This ends up also focusing a lot on art, which just brings this whole year's worth of this particular curriculum together really nicely. And then in terms of films for this section, I'm going to be watching Black Is, Black Ain't, which is a documentary directed by Marlon Riggs, who also directed Tongues Untied. And this is more about Black identity. And then I also plan to watch the Frontline documentary on AIDS in Black America. And to go along with this, I have a lecture that I'm going to be listening to, as well as like a short kind of documentary. And that brings me to the fourth and final part, looking at my HIV and AIDS TBR. And in this, I'm looking more specifically at the queer Black experience around this time. And I plan on reading Brother to Brother, edited by Essex Hemphill. This is more essays by Black queer people. And Love is a Dangerous Word by Essex Hemphill, which is a poetry collection. I plan on getting Desire Lines by Carrie Allen Johnson, which is a novel, and reading that along with My Government Means to Kill Me by Rashid Newson. Both of these are novels that are more recently published, but they are by people who lived through this time period. Other books that I've since decided to kind of add, I want to read some works by Brontes Purnell. I have 10 Bridges I Burnt, which is poetry, and I have my partner's copy of Since I Laid My Burden Down, which is a novel. I will say, in addition to some of the stuff, I have other novels that I am probably going to be reading that are adjacent. For example, I'd really like to get into David Feinberg's works, starting with 86. He has 2 novels and a memoir that I'd like to read. I honestly, I have so much gay literature from this time that I'll probably be reading along with this stuff. So there's that as well. So that's all. As though that was a small amount. That's all for the HIV and AIDS books that I'll be reading. Next, I'll talk about the works for my prehistoric nature personal curriculum. The books that I want to read include Dinosaurs, New Visions of a Lost World by Michael Benton, which I've already started. I'd read some of it last year. It looks kind of like an encyclopedia, but it's not. It kind of takes a different dinosaur and talks about how it was found, and in talking about that dinosaur, you learn different things about how they know what they know about dinosaurs. So for instance, there will be one and they'll talk about how they know that it was pigmented a certain way, like how they discovered that and that sort of thing. I also have The Lost World of Dinosaurs by, I can read my own handwriting, Armin Schmidt. And this one is, from what I can tell, like a shorter history. We have Digging Dinosaurs by John Horner Stephen, which is a memoir about someone who is doing archaeology. I want to say this book came out in the 60s or not 60s. I want to say this book came out in the 70s or 80s. Dinosaur in a Haystack by Jay Gould, which is, from what I can tell, and the little bit that I've looked, a more popular one, kind of talking about dinosaurs generally. And then Other Lands by Thomas Halliday, which is more general old stuff, not just dinosaurs, but like a lot of like plants and like stuff before the dinosaurs. And then the films that I want to watch include Why Dinosaurs, which is an earlier documentary, Dinosaur 13, which I had recommended to me pretty highly, and Life on Our Planet, which I think is more general than just dinosaurs. Like, I think it goes further out than that, but that one is also more recent. And I think I would like to watch them in order of when they came out, because I think that would be neat to see, like, the differences. And then along with this, I also want to read Dinosaur Sanctuary. I've actually read volume 1 before, but I'm going to reread this and then read volumes 2 and 3 and probably more, assuming that I like them. And the cool thing about these, it's like a wholesome Jurassic Park, kind of. The main characters are like caretakers, except in this one, dinosaurs there was just like a small island of them that ended up surviving. So then, of course, they made them into tourist attractions. But the cool thing about these books is that they include pages of information by someone who actually knows about dinosaurs. So they have a research consultant who has parts in here, and they're intentional with the details that they include about the dinosaurs. Other than that, there's a high probability that I will be rewatching Land Before Time. And I'm going to call it a part of this because it's fun. And then finally, I have my cooking personal curriculum, which is largely going to be based around Start Here by Sola El Whaley. I already mentioned this. You can use it like a regular cookbook, but it also is kind of set up to be like different courses. So you start out by learning certain things about taste and then how to deal with temperature. So it's really like from the bottom up skill building, which is going to be awesome. And then so this is really going to be more about what I do with this rather than just reading. But I do have some other books that are going to be fun to read and hopefully make me more excited about cooking. I have split this up into two parts, mostly arbitrarily, to be honest with you. Like, I did think about how many fiction or nonfiction or whatever, but I'm not looking really too closely at when I'm going to read which nonfiction. When I'm going to read which, like, book that's not the main thing that's actually teaching me. But the books that I have that I'd like to read, I have the book Bite by Bite, which is an essay collection. I have Fieldwork, which is a memoir. This is someone who I think tried to start a restaurant and then COVID happened. And then I have With the Fire on High by Elizabeth Acevedo, which is a novel about a teenage mother who I think wants to go to cooking school. I'm not too sure about the details because I haven't read it yet. But I have heard nothing but good things about it, and I loved both of Elizabeth Acevedo's other books. This one is not told in poetry like the others, but I'm pretty sure it's going to be really good. And then I have Aphrodite by Isabel Allende, which is, from what I can tell, like memoir mixed with folklore. There are also actual recipes in this. So that seems like it's going to be really cool. There's also like visual artwork throughout it. And then I have Love and Other Disasters by Anita Kelly, which is a cooking competition romance. And Chef's Choice by TJ Alexander, which I think is another cooking competition romance. Both of these have trans characters. I think Love and Other Disasters has a non-binary character, and Chef's Choice is T for T. I think there might be a book in this series before this, but I'm starting with Chef's Kiss because I want to read something that's T for T. So those are the things that I would like to read at some point this year. There is a chance that some of the ones with HIV and AIDS TBR might bleed over into next year. Or maybe I'll end up doing some of the courses overlapping. I don't know. The whole point is to read stuff and have a good time. And I love putting together lists and things like that. I'm just trying to bridge the gap between my book list making hobby and my reading hobby so that maybe there's going to be more overlap. If you're doing a personal curriculum or anything adjacent to that, please let me know about it in the comments. And thank you all so much for watching. Bye.